Welcome back to another Trailmakers showcase. Since I've recently gotten over 3,000 hours in this game, I decided to do a couple of videos highlighting my favorite builds from all time. And today, we're going to be doing the aquatic builds. So without further ado, let's get to it. So the first build I'm going to pull out is the Doom Pontoon. It's the oldest boat that I still have saved, and it's pretty simple. It fires a burst of cannonballs, although back in the day it used to be fully automatic. And it's just a boat with some side pontoons for stabilization. Because this was well before I learned how to do any roll stabilization, and well before they had gyro stabilizers. And it's just a pretty simple boat, so I'm not really going to talk much more about it. We'll move on to some more interesting and unique things. Next we have my tiniest boat, which I submitted to one of the build challenges way back when. And it's just a little boat. We got two different horns, and a little talking parrot. And it's just a little tiny boat. But it's a very tiny boat, so I wanted to show it. So next up we have the first replica vehicle that I ever tried to do, an SKR-7, which was one of my favorite vehicles from War Thunder. It's lower on the list now, although I still like it quite a lot. And it doesn't really have much in combat ability. It just has little tiny cannons, which for some reason stopped making their noise. It's weird, they're only making the noise when you first start firing, then they just go quiet. That's spooky. But yeah, it's got fake torpedo bay. And the shaping's a little off in some places, but it has some of the distinguishing features that you need to tell it's an SKR-7, like those big weird exhaust things on the back. At least I think they're exhausts. They could be intakes, I don't know. And the radar tower here is eh. And the superstructure is bleh. It's just kind of a box. But it gets the idea across. You might not recognize it as an SKR-7 at first glance, but if you get told it's an SKR-7, you'd probably nod and be like, yeah, sure, I could see it. But I think I do have some better replicas along the way, so let's move on. Okay, and indeed, next up we've got a slightly better replica. This one here is a PR-123K, and not only is it a little bit more faithful to the original vehicle, it's more functional as well. We've got a proper minigun, and we have two torpedoes, which aren't the best. They're kind of snaking back and forth, but I suppose that's not the worst thing. It makes them a little more unpredictable and harder to dodge. But if I want to, this thing is so fast I can actually catch up to my torpedo and pass them. Which isn't quite how it is in War Thunder, but this is a quick little boat. So, from a lot of angles, it's more accurate than the other one, but it's still missing a couple of details. I do like, though, that I made the spotlight turn with the turret. It's just the little things. But yeah, piston accelerated torpedo launchers to get them off deck. And that's about it for this one, so let's move on. Now for a very different type of torpedo boat. This is the Trident. It's definitely a function over form kind of thing. It's kind of just a barge with two torpedo bays, but these are tracking torpedoes. Now, they're not programmed very well because distance sensors have changed quite a bit since this was made. But basically what they would do is if they send something on the left side, they would turn to the left, and if they send something on the right side, they would turn to the right. And you can see the little hinges there. The sensors fold open into kind of a crescent moon shape when it starts up. So if I go ahead and release one of the torpedoes, you might have seen it open up into that little arrow shape. And I don't think... No, this one's not fast enough to get in front of them. But you'll see, yep, when the torpedo goes to pass by the carrier, it takes a sharp turn towards it instead. So if we line up like so, yep, as soon as it gets within about 50 meters, it starts to see them. And they beep for some reason. And the machine gun on here is also slightly noteworthy because it's recoil compensated. You might be able to notice the little jets firing out the back, and that's these rocket thrusters, which set to a full speed are just about perfect to outdo or undo the recoil from the minigun. So it keeps it from pushing the boat around when you're firing. Keeps us nice and stable. But let's move on. Next up we have the Kitten Jet Mark 11U, which is an amphibious jet. This is my first amphibious jet, so I wanted to show it off. And as you can see, it works just fine underwater, although fairly slow. And I can still hear propulsion noises from those destroyed torpedoes, so I'm gonna go over this way. And we are clattering a bit because something's amiss here. Oh, I see what's wrong. The elevators and ailerons are too close to each other. And that's what's clapping. But it's just pretty much a basic plane and a basic submarine wrapped into one. Although it can't fight underwater anymore because regular guns don't function underwater now. And it has full thrust vectoring in the air and partial thrust vectoring underwater. But that's probably all I need to say about this one. So let's move on. Next we have another semi-replica. This here is based off the Tashkent, a Soviet destroyer, but I called it the Tashkat because, well, I wanted a cat-themed name. So I put a little cat on top of the bridge, the little cat ears and face up there. But it's only a semi-recreation because the turrets are obviously very basic and clunky. The superstructure is pretty basic, and the smokestacks are just little polygons. But it's got the basic layout of the Tashkent, without the torpedoes though. It should be longer and have torpedoes, but complexity limit and creativity limit hit me, I think. So let's move on. Next up, we definitely don't have a recreation of anything. This is Fenrir's autocannon ship. And the autocannon is this big thing on the front, and it's piston accelerated, recoil compensated, rapid fire cannon. Now back in the day, this used to be a fully automatic weapon instead of a burst fire, but they changed the timings on the cannons over the years. So now it just fires an 8-round volley, and it can fire them really freaking far because the pistons. And we've got secondaries for each side, and a weird little spinning face thing for a radar. But other than that, it's a pretty simple and basic ship, except for one weird little quirk. In order to make more volume out of the ship, I used inflatable balloons for my flotation. Now I don't know if the actual buoyancy is better or worse than any of the buoyant blocks, but it seemed to work out alright. Next up, I'm going to show you my first multi-part ship, which this is just the bow, so hold please while I assemble the rest. Okay, here's the assembled ship. It's 3 pieces, and it's a semi-recreation of the USSR Kronstadt. It was previously my flagship in War Thunder before the Sovietsky Soyuz came out, and it's got some of the normal or accurate traits, like it's got the rangefinders on the sides of the turrets properly, it's got the layouts of most of the secondaries alright, and it's got the anti-air a little bit. It doesn't have all the anti-air turrets, but oh well. I think you just heard a cat noise. And yeah, it's a pretty basic multi-part ship. It doesn't have any logic controls or anything that transfers the information from piece to piece, but each ship is able to sail the entire thing independently. And I had to change up some of the controls that have gotten messed up over the years. I haven't pulled this thing out in a while, but this is a good excuse to. But I'm gonna move on because this isn't my only multi-part ship, so we're gonna have some other setups to do, and I'll probably skip through those even faster. Well, not skip through the ships, skip through the setup. Next, we've got another multi-part ship, the Spokojnie, so hold please. Insert tab A into slot B. And there we go. So here we have the completed ship. It's a 4-piece multi-part ship. So it's 4 different builds interconnected. And this is a fairly accurate representation of the Spokojnie. We've got the radar and whatchamacallits on where I've got the little eyes on the turret. Rangefinder, probably? Rangefinder is the right word. And we've got the torpedoes, unlike the little Tashkent replica that I had earlier, although they're fake torpedoes. We could put real ones on now that we've got the torpedo launchers, but back in the day, making custom torpedoes, the complexity, it was just a little bit much for me. And then the superstructures, not too bad. We've got some of the little angled bits and distinguishing angles of the actual ship. And we've got a little spinning radar up here, communications array or whatever that is. And yeah, it's another pretty basic, technically speaking, ship in that there's no communication between the pieces, and each piece just has enough power to sail on its own, so it doesn't matter what seat you sit in, you can sail the ship from any of them. And it just has basic guns. It's probably best steered and driven from the back because the more powerful outboard engines are on there. So if you had a crew of 4, a crew of 3, you could run the whole thing. This middle piece doesn't actually have any weapons, you just have the decorative torpedo you can point around. But anyways, let's move on. Next we've got a quick little one, my folding dinghy. So it kind of folds and wraps up a little bit, and it's just a little floaty boaty. But it's very bouncy, so It's always been kind of fun to sail it around. There's no gyro stabilizers or anything, it's just a little bit bottom heavy, but it's always on the verge of tipping over, and that's kind of what I like about it. But it's just a little dinghy, so let's move on. Now we've got another multi-part to assemble, so one moment. So here's the assembled ship. It's an SKR-7 again, but at this scale it's much more accurate. The turrets look fine. We've got the RBU launchers. The superstructure is more accurate. We've got a better communication array. The torpedoes are still fake. And we've got the RBU launchers back here, along with those big old vents and everything. And it's just all in all a more detailed version. It's a 3-piece multi-part. And I've been thinking about making this a lot more functional because now we've got tiny tank cannons I could use for the guns. And we've got proper rockets that we've had those for a long time, but this is from before the airborne event. And yeah, it's just another replica. It's the same old build style, so you can sail it from any of the pieces. And I think this might be the last multi-part we see for a while because I kind of took a break from them. Next up, we've got a cat head submarine. So it's piston glitched in, so all this buoyancy and control stuff here is gonna kind of get pulled up into the middle. It's still jutting out every which way though, because this is the early version. But it's a proper submarine. It'll hold its buoyancy or control its buoyancy, and do all the things. And it's just a little cat sub. And if I surface again, you can see it meows. But I might not even leave this one in the video because it's kind of derpy. Next we have a mini replica Spokojnie, and it still has all the main details. We've got our 2 main cannons, our 2 torpedo launchers, and our 4 sets of secondaries. And it's just a very cutesy little version of the Spokojnie. It still has some of the distinguishing features, like its weird wall or rail thing here. And yeah. Can you tell I like the Russian ships in War Thunder? Because I like the Russian ships in War Thunder. I'm a max level Navy player over there. Tiny battleship? Tiny battleship. It's just a tiny little battleship. The turrets aren't even articulated. And it's just a quick little cute thing that I kept around because it's kind of adorable. Next, this gangly looking creation is an RC bomb boat, and it uses the piston and distance sensor method instead of the seat method, so people can't get into the actual boat and steal it or anything like that. So I forgot to activate the camera first, but as you can see, we're still in this seat, and the boat independently acts from us. Although I just realized seat turning is still on the main creation, so we actually rotate around a little bit when we're turning the little boat. But we got some horns on there for warning. And of course it's got the bomb. And it's pretty straightforward. Not simple, but straightforward. Then we have our next cat submarine, which is again piston glitched in the clamshell method. So the seat ends up being completely encompassed in the head, so you are the brain. But as a submarine, this is a little bit better. It's a lot quicker, and you can angle yourself up and down in addition to adjusting your buoyancy, so you can ascend and descend much easier. And it doesn't have any articulation, it's just a very stiff-legged little cat, but it's still kind of cute, so I wanted to show it off. And the meow is kind of like a dolphin noise too, as it bounces through the waves. So next up we have my torpedo boat with Bombay artillery. And we've got that same recoil-compensated minigun turret from earlier, although I think it wasn't decorated as a cat before, but now it is. We have torpedoes that individually fire off the same button. So each time you press the button, it releases one. And then we've got the Bombay artillery, which is pretty simple on this version. It fires at a set distance forwards and backwards, and just provides you with some close-range support fire. And, oh, I didn't get out from it very gracefully, but like most of my Bombays, or at least the early ones, it's sponsored by Melvin's Mushrooms. What happened there? Something terrible happened to this build when I got out of it, so let's move on. And next up we have the heavy artillery ship, which, as you can guess, uses a much more powerful Bombay launcher. And it uses it as the main cannon, so it's on a turret this time. And we have two different levels of zoom. It fires a ton of bombs, really fast, and oh, I didn't wait for the recharge. Oops. So my safety system can only account for so much. You still have to let it recharge all the way before you fire. It's just that if you let off the firing button early, it'll keep firing for you. But that's the logic stuff, and it's not really visual, so not gonna worry about that too much. And that's about all there is to say about this ship. It's just all about the one main gun. And it is quite the main gun, though. It'll obliterate most things, even if they're covered with shields. And next we have my first hydrofoil, which just has that same old minigun slapped on it, because it's just a very good turret. I've slapped it on a lot of things. But as you can see, it works properly like a hydrofoil. We get up on the wings, and it just barely supports itself on the edge of the water, minimizing drag, so you can use minimal engine power. And it just has a normal rudder steering. And it does have some auxiliary engines, so that if we're sunk down, it helps us get out of the water a little bit easier. I think I also put them back there to balance out the weight of the minigun, but I could have just used weight blocks. But, you know, if you're gonna make something heavy, you might as well make it useful too. And of course, we've got a floating cat on top, because, well, why not? Every hydrofoil needs a good floating cat. Next up we have my guided torpedo boat, or at least my first one. And it's also got a couple interesting features in that it has a weapon selection system. So you'll notice we're only moving and shooting our first turret right now. And if we skip a couple weapon selections down... Oh, no, there it is. There was only one down. I forgot which weapon selection was which, and I can't really see the lights all that well. But we've got the Bombays on the back. And then, of course, we have the guided torpedoes, which are remote controlled, and you can fire both at once if you want, and control both of them. Although, then it gets a little harder to maintain not hitting yourself with them. Am I gonna do it? Whoa, no I'm not. And other than that, they work like normal torpedoes. They just have the distance sensor on the front and the dynamite. But inside the fuselage, inside the superstructure is the piston distance sensor method, so there's no seat on these, just like the bomb boat earlier. And I'll just let those drift away, because we also have an array of little features, little sound effects and things, and it's also on the weapon selection panel. And I've got a tutorial on the weapon selection logic, if you want to look at it. I may or may not remember to link it in the description. But yeah, you can see we've got little icons on our lights, which actually make it harder to see which light is on, so not the best idea. Should have labeled them with blocks in front of them or something, but I don't know, live and learn. Moving on. I don't know why it took me as long as it did to build a rowboat, but eventually I built a little rowboat. It just paddles forward, and if you want to turn, it'll just paddle one side at a time. It's very simple, but uses a little bit of logic for the extra controls. And it's just a little rowboat. Enough said, right? Everyone needs a little rowboat. Next up, we probably have my best replica, and it's another Spokojnie. This one's a 5-parter. It has a lot more details put into it, from the superstructure to the cannons, and even the propulsion, because this one uses bionic engines in the back, so that although you can still control the ship from any segment, technically, it's very, very slow, because it's so big, and each part only has a few engines on it. But with the bionic engines in the back, the whole ship hauls booty. Those bionic propellers get us going to almost 50 miles an hour for this entire build, and swings us right around in a circle pretty tight. So if you had the crew, this would actually make a fairly effective combat ship, it might. But it does only have 2 turrets with 2 cannons on each, so it'd be a little weak, I suppose, but hey, there's a lot of blocks to destroy, so it might take a while to kill it. But putting one of these together for a fight doesn't happen very often, so we'll see if something like that ever happens. If it does, we might have to replace some of these torpedo launchers with actual torpedoes, now that we have the surface-to-air torpedo blocks. That would be handy. That would make it a functional ship, I think. But probably my favorite replica, I think, that I've made anyways. Obviously other people have made much better replicas. Ones that are not purple. But I like my purple. Anyways, let's move on. Next we have my box and bomb torpedo boat, which is kind of more of the same. It has a weapon selector logic, but its main cannon is a box cannon, which is a custom weapon that's been highly nerfed over the last few updates, but I still enjoy it nonetheless because it can capsize an entire ship in one hit if they don't have stabilization or anything going on for it. It'll just knock it straight over. But we also have torpedoes. This is before the standardized torpedoes. They're nice custom ones. They go pretty fast and pretty straight. And then we've got the bomb bay launcher on the back. And a couple of sound effects and special features. Literal bells and whistles. But let's move on, shall we? Next we have something that's still pretty much in the prototyping phase because the logic is still all laid out on the deck, but we have my kayak. It was a little harder to make than the rowboat, but not all that much. It's the same kind of concept, where we've got the main paddling, and then we have individual buttons for turning paddling. And it's just a kayak. Well, a kayaking device. It's not quite a kayak, I suppose. But, yeah. I just wanted to show it off because it was an interesting little project. Now we're getting into the more modern builds because we've got the torpedo blocks. But this here is a mini PR123K. And it's got our little machine gun with the fired up update? I don't remember what it's called. The most recent update with the weapon skins. Then we've got our little torpedoes. And we're just a tiny little torpedo boat. Not much more to be said about it, other than I really like the 123K. It's one of my favorite little torpedo boats in War Thunder. Next, I'm going to pull out my most advanced multi-part ship because it actually is a combat vessel this time. And it uses the piston distance sensor method to communicate between pieces of the ship, so the entire thing is controlled by a single seat in the middle. When they spawn this in, you'll see that we don't even actually spawn in a seat. There's not one in the build, so it can't be stolen. You only need one crew member. A couple other benefits, I suppose. But next we'll put out the butt end because the seat's in the middle. And then we'll go over here. And spawn the middle in. And as you can see, we've got a lot of different weapon types, so it also has logic for weapon selection controls, which are embedded in each of the three sections, but communicated and synchronized through the pistons. And it's a little harder to line these up than before, than my earlier version, but it is an overall better connection. Because we're actually stabilizing the connection up and down instead of just side to side as well. Gotta go over here a little bit. Slide it in. Okay, and we'll resynchronize our weapon controls, and I believe we're ready to go. So this is the multi-part destroyer, and our weapons include a double-firing set of main cannons. We've got Bombay artillery launchers on the front. We've got frontal torpedoes, and you can fire them individually per side in case we have allies or land next to us. Then we have an assortment of special features, just bells and whistles. Next we have the main cannon on the back, which is the same thing, double firing. Then we've got the torpedoes, which have 5 on the back instead of 3. And I believe this is also the setting, yep. This is also the setting for the depth charges. Shoots them out pretty good. And finally we have the Bombay launcher, which is a pretty standardized unit that I put on a couple of ships now. And all its propulsion is on the middle section, so I don't have to transfer any of that propulsion information back and forth between the ship sections. And all in all, this is probably one of my favorite aquatic builds that I've ever done. It was a nice big project with a lot of logic involved and some aesthetics. But anyways, we'll probably move on now. I don't think there's much more to say about this. It's just a very big combat ship. And I've had a couple of fights with it. At least one of them is made on the channel, I'm pretty sure. I suppose I'll show the 4-gun frigate because I've been using it fairly often recently. Because we have piston-accelerated torpedoes here for better launching. And we have doubled up cannons here for extra firepower and extra hit chance because they're fired out of sync. So if we're moving, that'll give us twice the chance of being on target. And it's pretty basic, but because of the way it's structured and built, it's been pretty tough in the fight. And it's also decently fast and agile, which helps out its survivability. And I just wanted to show it off real quick because it's one of my more recent builds, and I've been using it a lot. I just love those piston-accelerated weapons. I really do. Then we have another cat head sub, but much better than the earlier one. It still has a clamshell design, but the sphere is much better. And we've got a little torpedo launcher. And we still have full buoyancy control. And we can tilt up and down to aid our mobility. And the torpedoes just fire right out of the forehead. Because why not? Oops. Hurt myself a little bit there, but that's okay. Because this is just a basic little build. We don't really have much more to say about it. I just like these cat spheres. I've got a bunch of flying ones too. But you'll see them in another video. And I almost said that was all and signed off the video, but I realized we skipped over one, a very important one, and that's the Bionic Race Boat Mark 8. Because this is one of the fastest Bionic boats in Trailmakers, at least on the PlayStation version. I couldn't help but show it off. We're going 450 miles an hour. And we have okay agility. And this is a zero power core build, by the way. That's what Bionic means. It's the Zero Power Core Race League. And to keep it stable, we have automatic pitch and roll control on it. Because otherwise, this thing really likes to dip into the water or take off into the sky. But yeah, I figured this would be a good one to close up the video with, as we just kind of zip around all these islands. And if you've gotten this far, thanks for watching. This is probably going to be another long one. I made these videos mostly for myself because I got to the 3,000 hour mark. But I hope anyone else who watched them enjoyed. If you've got any questions or comments or anything, leave them in the messages. And if you want to support the channel or make me happy, leave a like and subscribe. Bye-bye now.
PlayStation